I will get us going. And we are streaming live. Welcome everyone to the October 11th regular town board meeting for the Hillsborough Board of Commissioners. We're glad you're joining us tonight, whether those of you gathered here on the screen or if you are tuning in via the town's YouTube channel. And due to public health concerns, we do continue to meet remotely. I will not read the public charge, but we do have a long history of keeping with the public charge. And we can begin with the roll call.
Commissioner Bell.
Present.
Commissioner English.
Present.
Commissioner Ferguson.
Present.
Commissioner Hughes. Commissioner Lloyd. Mayor Weaver.
I am here. Thank you so much. And next we have item number 2, audience comments not related to the printed agenda. And I do believe we have someone signed up to speak.
Yes, we have Colin Dodd.
We'll wait for him to get into the Zoom room. Welcome, Mr. Dodd. And you know the drill. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all so much for your time. I just returned from the Orange County School Board meeting at A.L. Stanback. I won't tell you about that. It'll, I think, be widely reported. And I wasn't in the meeting, but my understanding is they were going to pass a pretty strongly worded resolution tonight. And I think it passed. I assume that it did. But I want to, again, direct your attention to the relationship between your government, the town government, and the Hillsborough Chamber of Commerce, the CEO of which, as you all know, is the majority owner of the Hot Tin Roof that provided a safe harbor, a safe space, a meeting place, a gathering place, a recruiting center for one of the hate groups that were at A.L. Stanback tonight. I know that's not in the town limits, at least I don't think it is. So, and I just want to bring this back to you again, and I'm going to continue to do this. I understand and accept that she can't be removed from the tourism board. I also know that you all understand how awful that looks, especially now, especially today. But I've become aware of this thing called big, bold ideas, which my understanding is the Orange County government is going to partner with them to come up with big, bold ideas about how our county is going to grow. And she sits on the steering committee of that organization, as do, I believe, 2 of you. And so, again, I just want to draw attention to this, get you thinking about how you're going to interact with her on that committee. Do you plan on seconding any of her motions if she makes any? I mean, it's, you know, this isn't her appointed seat on the town tourism board that she can't be removed from. This is I think it's like a think tank or a local version of an NGO that she's, because of her status in the Chamber of Commerce, she's been appointed a seat. And I know you can't answer me, but I would, if I were you guys, I would really question how you want to interact with her on that committee, because a lot of people are watching that specifically. And I'm not sure what the parameters are, what's proper for you guys to do, but the school board resolution is more specific than a lot of the resolutions that I've seen and heard. And my understanding is that when the Chamber of Commerce affirmed their support of her beforehand, they questioned her about whether she was a racist. And I'm just here to tell you, this is way beyond racism. This is about, you know, queer folk. This is about basically whether you believe in government and democracy. And the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, her friends don't believe in democracy. And they proved that on January 6th. And so I'm here again, and I'll be back next month and the month after to plant the question in your head about how you want to interact with her and the Chamber of Commerce. Because she, as CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, that is legitimacy. I mean, plain and simple, even though she's not in government. And you are in government and you are accountable. And you really need to get clear in your heads about how you want to interact with her.
Mr. Dodd, I'm sorry, you've gone to 4 minutes. So if you could
Okay,
seal
I'm
your
done.
comments.
No,
Okay.
That's it. I'll be back next month. I'll see you
All right.
then.
Thank you for joining us this evening. And I do want to acknowledge that this is National Coming Out Day. And on a day as this to have, I did see before our meeting started that there were a group organized an anti-LGBTQ rally at one of our public schools. I saw the images of the Proud Boys in their outfits there as a community leader and as a parent of 2 kids in the public school system. It's very, very disturbing. And I think we all ought to be alarmed that they are making their presence known in that way.
Thank you for your time.
Moving on to item number 3, we have quite a number of agenda changes tonight. So please bear with us as we make sure we get them all correct. I'm going to do my best. Sarah made me a great list. Thank you, Sarah. I just find my right piece of paper. Okay, one item we need to add is the Indigenous Peoples Proclamation, which we'll add as item number 4 as a presentation to be read after we make these changes and approve the agenda. And then there are several changes to the September 27 draft minutes in the consent agenda. Item 4B in those draft minutes, budget amendments for the water treatment plant filters repair and rebuild. There's a change in the inclusion of the amount of money that is to be allocated, where the funds are coming from, and a correction of when the work should be finished by, which is by the fiscal year rather than the end of the calendar year, and the addition of a supportive comment made by Commissioner Lloyd. Then we have 2 items to be pulled from the consent agenda. Item number, what will now be item number 5. The consent agenda will now be item number 5. Item 5E, the special event permit. We need to have a brief discussion about what to do if things worsen with COVID. So if the public health issues require some conditions to be made on that permit. And then item number 5G, the endorsement of the updated historic district design standards. That also needs to be pulled for discussion. So we will add those as item 6. The special event permit will be item 6D. And the HDC design standards will be item 6E. And then hot topics will be item F. I think I got it right. Bob's giving me the thumbs up, which is always a good sign. So that is a lot of adjustments and changes to the agenda. Is anyone brave enough to to make a motion?
Move to approve the amended agenda as outlined by Mayor Jen.
Second.
Moved by Kathleen, seconded by Mark. We can roll call the agenda changes and approval.
Commissioner Bell,
Aye.
Commissioner English,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
And the amended agenda is approved. Next, we have item number 4, the Indigenous Peoples Day presentation. So in addition to being National Coming Out Day, it is Indigenous Peoples Day. And as many of us will remember, we originally passed a resolution identifying the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples Day back in 2014. It has not been our practice to necessarily update and read a new proclamation every year, but Matt suggested we do that this year and was kind enough to update it as a proclamation for today, October 11th, 2021, which I will now read. Whereas Indigenous people have lived and thrived in North America from time immemorial, and whereas on this Indigenous Peoples Day, the town of Hillsborough celebrates and recognizes the contributions and resilience of Indigenous peoples, including the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation, and whereas Hillsborough was founded on land stolen from the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation, who had inhabited lands along the Eno River long before European settlement, and whereas Indigenous people in the Americas have long suffered persecution and removal from their homelands through the colonization, settlement, and forming of America, and whereas our community and society as a whole must commit itself to living out the principles of equality, opportunity, and racial justice in a way that uplifts Indigenous peoples and their lived experiences by making our government and its agencies more accessible through policy, practices, and law. And whereas Indigenous people are resilient and have continued to thrive and prosper to the present day, and having contributed greatly to the fabric of our nation through labor, technology, philosophy, arts, culture, and the armed forces. And whereas in 1977, the International Conference on the Discrimination Against Indigenous People in the Americas first proposed the idea of Indigenous Peoples Day as a way to reimagine Columbus Day. And whereas in 2015, the Hillsborough Board of Commissioners adopted a resolution resolving recognition of Indigenous Peoples Day on the second Monday of October. And whereas we must never forget the centuries-long campaign of violence, displacement, assimilation, and terror wrought upon Native communities and tribal nations throughout our country. Now, therefore, I, Jen Weaver, Mayor of the town of Hillsborough, do hereby recognize October 11th, 2021 as Indigenous Peoples Day in the town of Hillsborough. And I call this observance to the attention of all residents in the town as a day of reflection upon the struggles of Indigenous peoples and a day of celebrating the thriving cultures and values of Indigenous peoples. Thank you again, Commissioner Hughes, for making sure we had that on our agenda tonight. Now we come to item number 5, our consent agenda. What's the pleasure of this board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Kathleen, seconded by Mark, I think. And we can roll call the vote.
Commissioner Bell,
Aye.
Commissioner English,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
And the consent agenda is approved. Item number 6, moving to our regular agenda. Item 6A, we have a request from the Elfin Pond Homeowners Association to accept neighborhood streets in an expedited manner. And we
and
might need
Margaret
to
should
get-
be right back.
Yeah, thank you. So if you're tuning in with us, Margaret is probably going to help Commissioner Lloyd get set up, and she will be back.
Mayor Weaver, may I take a point of privilege and note that today is also World Mental Health Day.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, especially in light of some of the awful news coming out of the UNC campus. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
And I'm going to put a plug for NAMI, which is an amazing group supporting families of those who have received diagnoses, those who suspect or don't know or just want to reach out, and Club Nova. And Club Nova did get a huge thing. So thank you for that point of privilege.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing those important resources to our attention. And welcome, Commissioner Lloyd. We're glad you are here. And hello, Margaret. Your screen, oh, there, no, you're unfrozen. When you get your wits about you, we are on the Elfin Pond item.
And so hopefully Scott Little from the Homeowners Association will be joining us. And what you have tonight is, the board members may remember a few months ago, we talked about establishing a policy for when communities with private streets wanted to petition the town to take over those private streets. And we've started down that process with the neighborhood that asked at that time. We've since received some communication from Elfin's Pond, which is another one of those communities, that they have some interest in moving along rather quickly, as they're having some challenges with their trash provider. And so they are here tonight to ask for expedited service or expedited handling of that turnover. And a couple of components of that request are that, one, the speed. And because we set the policy up to have the entire process happen, the dedication of the streets be accepted by the town, and then services would begin. They're sort of asking to the reverse of that, so the services begin first, and then we work through with them the dedication process, which is possible. The staff would just ask for some frame or guardrails to be put on that to what happens if things don't go as we would hope. And the neighborhood is also asking to not have to incur any costs associated with that process, which primarily refers to the testing core samples being done of the streets to verify their construction status or construction meeting our minimum standards. And again, the policy indicated that those samples would be done. And I just wanted to bring it to the board to get some direction or decision from the board on how they would like to handle this request, given that it's somewhat different than the policy that was recently adopted. And so Scott Little and some of the other members of the board are here. In the audience, we also have, I think, one other resident of the present. And so I don't know, Scott, if you have questions, comments, anything you'd like to add for the board to consider. They received your letter and kind of the staff cover sheet that you saw, and I'll be quiet now.
So good evening, board members. My name is Scott Little, as Margaret had noted. I'm actually sitting here amongst the entire board, sitting behind me. I think our webcam isn't the greatest, but we are all present. So I think, Margaret, you laid it out pretty well. There is a need that the community here would like to kind of pass through expeditiously in order for the town to take over the streets. The first thing that we'd like to do is have the trash service taken over, as we are paying for a contract right now, or actually a month-to-month contract. So it's not an issue for us to exit out of that, but that would be the first order of business for the community.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Sorry, noise activity in my house.
We have the same.
Do board members have any questions for Mr. Little and his HOA board? Kathleen. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Hopefully y'all can hear me now.
Yes.
So I was reading through, and it sounds indeed you're having some issues with your trash provider. When did that start? And can you walk through a little bit of history?
Yeah, it's kind of been an ongoing issue for us of various types, with either the equipment that they're bringing, the residue that they're leaving, or just the scheduling, and not necessarily picking up on time. I'm actually getting a notice from one of the other board members here that unfortunately the contract is a little deficient because there aren't any workers' comp insurance included in their contract. They do not afford that. Oh, you're back on mute.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
It's Monday. So can you give me a time frame of when these issues were noticed? Because my core question is, whenever I hear a question of expeditiously, my question is, how long has this been an issue? And when, at what point, was the decision made to reach out to the board? Because that's why I'm trying to figure out, if you can lay out that timeline to help me understand.
Yeah, so it's a good question, Kathleen. So we've been dealing with the issues as noted, but we unfortunately couldn't do anything until the developer turned over the community to the board, and that just occurred this year. So that was probably the biggest stake holding us back.
And sorry, one more question. Earlier this year, this summer, the spring, yesterday, when was it?
Approximate, June timeframe.
Okay, thank you. And that's my last question, I promise.
That's okay.
If there's no other questions for the Elfin Pond group at this time, questions for Margaret?
Questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I was going back what the items to consider. Is the town going to provide services in advance? I guess I got the right one. In the advance of the dedication?
I think that's a question for the town board to decide.
Okay.
Yeah. Mark, go ahead, Mark.
Margaret, what is a likely timeline to complete all those tasks associated with the process? It was very involved in a lot of different steps. So I'm just curious, is this a 6-month thing or a 3-month thing, or can we start with one of the trash and then while working on the others, or is that not permissible?
We could. I mean, if the board directs us to start, I'm sorry, I'm wirelessly connected, so I'm having some real stability issues. So if I talk over to someone, I fully apologize. I've got a real time delay going on my end. We could start service very quickly. The only concern that staff raises is that what happens if there is a problem discovered with the quality of the streets that causes the dedication to be delayed? Do we stop service? What do we do? And I just feel like it would be better to establish those guardrails before we start than to start and then decide when we're in the midst of the process. But your question was, how long does it take? And I honestly don't know the answer, because if we ask them to have the core samples done, I don't know how long it would take to get someone on contract for that. We talked with the Waterstone folks about this in August, and they have given me 2 different prices. So it's taken, a month or 2 to get those prices, and they still haven't done the work. So, I mean, it could easily be, to be fair, I would say it could take till April to get this done according to our policy. And I understand that doesn't address the concerns that the neighborhood is having. I just wanted this board to talk through the what if situations.
Thank you. And it seems from my reading of the application and our recent discussions about this, that it would seem plausible to me to be able to proceed with the trash pickup while we await. And then if something comes back 6 months from now where the road is deficient in some way, or there's some type of problem getting the report done or anything like that, that we just kind of address it when we get to that point. But expecting it might take 3 to 6 months at least to kind of figure that out. I'm fine with that.
That's actually
Go ahead, Kathleen.
okay. Thank you for Commissioner Bell, because I was going to ask that question also. And I am in agreement that I am fine with this providing service during the process, but I do believe from a due diligence standpoint, we need to know what we are taking over. Streets are expensive, but that's part of, it's called informed consent. We don't know what we're taking on until we do some of the basic due diligence, and I believe we owe it to the community and to our staff and to the town itself to do that. So I would like us to proceed with the core samples and the basic due diligence, but I also believe that we should be able to provide service and just go from there. Because I think we can have another conversation, understanding that it may take 3, 6, 9 months, whatever that time frame is.
Matt? And then Rob?
Thank you. And if you hear noises behind me, my dogs are seemingly very rambunctious tonight. And I'm looking off to the side because I have multiple screens, so I apologize for that. So I actually find myself agreeing with the staff recommendation of not bypassing the requirement to provide the core samples, because I think it's very important, and it seems as though another community is actually moving forward with the core samples. My concern is that in moving forward with providing the trash service on what ostensibly would still be a road that's not actually in our care, that we have an issue where we have one community that's moving forward with their process under the policy we adopted to clarify this situation, and we have another community that's asking to have us set aside our recently adopted policy because of an inconvenience with their solid waste provider, and or the service quality not being where it should be. And while I'm sympathetic, I don't think it's something I can support.
Matt, just to be clear, I just want to be sure I'm kind of hearing what everyone is saying. You are saying that you would not want to start trash pickup until at all until the core sampling has been done?
That's correct. If
Okay.
we vote on this tonight, I would be a no vote.
Yeah, and I would be as well.
Okay, thank you, Evelyn. Rob, and then I see that Mr. Little has his hand up also. Go ahead, Rob.
It's more a question, maybe a question for Margaret. Did we set a timeline for Water Center Estates to have those core samples done?
No, the way it works is that we gave them the policy and said that they needed to go do that. And then at the time that they do that, report back to us, share those with us, show that the roads are built to standards, and then formally offer the streets for dedication. And this board votes to accept them. At that point, after the documents are recorded in the Register of Deeds, the town will accept the streets and begin trash service.
Okay.
So we have not started serving any of these neighborhoods yet. We are waiting to make sure that everything falls in line. It
Thank
was
you.
just the recommendation to make sure that something didn't get left off, or that we get in an odd situation.
Yep, and that's kind of what I'm feeling also. I think it's critical that we have, and I think it's critical that we have, the core samples again, so that we, again, know what we're actually accepting. So I'm in favor of having the core samples done first.
Thank you, Rob. And real quickly, Margaret, Waterstone Estates, they are paying, their neighborhood is paying for the core sampling?
Yeah, it's actually the terraces. The estates are already in because those are the
Sorry.
houses, but the
Yeah.
terraces are the townhouses, and they are undertaking the samples. They've sent me 2 cost estimates, and they are doing that work.
Okay, thank you. Bob, I was going to go to Mr. Little next. Do you feel like you need to chime in first? Okay, all right. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Little.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I just want to kind of clarify a couple of things. So, in one respect, we're not asking it to bypass the process versus start the process while the evaluation is taking place. And we would submit that in order to pay for the analysis, that we utilize the tax revenue that had been generated from the tax collection from the neighborhood since 2015 to cover those expenses.
Okay, thank you. Now I will jump over to Mr. Hornick.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to remind the board, we just established this policy, and we seem to have a habit of establishing policies and then ignoring them. For example, with parking pads and the like. If we start establishing policies and then making exceptions each time someone comes along and asks us for a waiver, what's the sense in even having the policy? And there's a lot of potential arbitrariness in the decisions. If we say yes to the Elfins Pond group, but no to the Waterstone group, and then someone else is going to come along and ask us for some other departure from the policy, it puts us in legal jeopardy, I think, for being arbitrary and capricious. But also, it begs the question of why do we even have the policy in the first place? If we don't apply it.
Thank you, Bob. Mark? And then Matt, is your hand up again? Okay.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that my suggestion was only regarding trash pickup, not anything else regarding what has been discussed tonight, since they have been paying the full freight of the taxes since 2015. I don't know, I'm sorry, maybe it's in the agenda packet what the financial cost would be for the trash pickup. But I'm thinking of that as a minor accommodation, not a great variance from the policy. And I do, what Bob suggested does definitely resonate with me, especially given the whole parking pad situation. So that is still fresh in my mind as well.
Thank you, Mark. Matt?
I have a question for Bob and then one for Mr. Little, if that's actually appropriate. In the items to consider, Bob, one of the things that's mentioned under the staff recommendation is a hold harmless agreement prior to dedication. Could you elaborate on what that might look like or what might be included in such an agreement?
Well, I suppose that the town would, I didn't draft this, so I wasn't in the mind of the writer, but I think we'd want to make sure that the town would be protected from any liability. For example, in the event that we decided after the core samples were done or whatever, that we weren't going to take the road. if we changed our minds later on, or it turned out that the process didn't work out the way everyone here at the front end hopes it would work out, there may be some finger pointing later on. And I would want to make sure that the town is held harmless by agreement with the association.
And as a follow-up, what is the legal issue, if there is one, of providing something like trash service on what is currently ostensibly a private road?
I'm not sure that there's any legal issue with that just because of that status. But I think in the past, we haven't provided our town trash service on private roads. And that has partly to do with the way some of those roads are built differently and can't accommodate the heavy equipment. Margaret may have some better background on that too.
You're up, Margaret. On delay.
Yeah, so what I have heard in other circumstances similar to this is, sometimes school buses won't go through neighborhoods sometimes, but the Orange County recycling trucks go through these neighborhoods. And maybe Orange County Recycling doesn't worry about the damage that they might cause to the private streets and possibly being asked to help repair the streets at a future date. But that was what was in my mind of, if we went forward with providing service, but didn't actually end up taking the streets, we might want some sort of agreement about either a statement from the homeowner association that they were not going to try and seek funds from the town to make repairs due to the weight of the vehicles traveling in their neighborhood or so forth. And, we haven't really fleshed that out, but I just wanted to raise that as an option if the board members wanted to provide service but delay acceptance of the streets.
Got it. And Mr. Little, I'm curious about the line in our packet about the owners being unwilling or asking to have no additional cost, which staff indicates that is an unwillingness to pay for the core sample in the document recording. Could you elaborate on that piece in our packet?
Yeah, so I don't believe there's an unwillingness to pay for it. We're just talking to the point that the taxes that we've already paid or have not gotten a credit for should be used to cover those costs. It's as simple as that. And if I may, just about the point on policy, it's possible that each neighborhood that's built in the town has different circumstances by way of construction or where it's situated or the roads that are built. So I'm all for policy and not going outside of policy, but it's possible that we don't have all the information to create a policy yet because you haven't seen everything yet. And perhaps it should be a living document to be modified as each neighborhood comes online.
Thank you, Mr. Little and Kathleen.
Yes, and referencing what our town attorney, if you can refresh my memory, because I do recall when we were having a conversation about providing garbage pickup on private streets. And I believe that for the most part, we had said we would not, although there is still an exception hanging out. And I just want to if Bob, if you can clarify, I want to check my memory and make sure that what I recall is correct.
My recollection is that our policy has been that on private streets, we do not provide solid waste services. And precisely for one of the reasons, at least, that Margaret had explained, in that if we don't know what the quality of that road is and its substrata, then we don't know whether our multi-ton trash trucks are going to damage the street, whether the street will be passable for those trucks when they're loaded. And we just have less control over the quality of the surface, the roadway itself. Now, I think recently, with some of the newer approved developments in recent months or year, we might have made a decision or two that's different than that. But for about 20 years before that, at least, that was the way we rolled. That if it was a private street, we did not provide those services.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. And my second question is actually for Margaret on the core samples. Can you refresh my memory of how many core samples do we normally take? Would we take one for each street? Because I mean, we all know that conditions vary. So what's a typical number of core samples, for this, for the linear feet of roads, and given the topography and where we are, what are we looking at?
I don't have the number in front of me of how many were going to be in this neighborhood, but it was based on, one at every, where two roads intersect. And then if there was an extended dead end, that there would be one taken if that dead end street, I think, was longer than, say, 400 feet. So, I mean, in each of we looked at 3 neighborhoods, and in each case, it was less than 10 samples that were needed.
Okay.
So, and that's why I shared the information from Waterstone Terraces, in that the estimates that they got from $3,000 to $5,000, I would think would be incredibly comparable to this neighborhood, because the number of samples were all very close in number for the 3 neighborhoods that we looked at.
And I noted that there was, cracks in sidewalks, in the curb and gutter. There were some pieces we've already noted. Do we take core samples near those areas, or is that just something that we note? Where we see where there's evidence of potential instability.
Well, the core samples are actually to tell us that whether the depth of the pavement of the street is to our need. The quality of the concrete in the sidewalks and curb is kind of a separate matter. And there would be a walkthrough by the public works manager to identify those points. And then, just like when we do our pavement assessment of these streets are good, these are okay, we could do a little maintenance here, and these are the ones who really need work. We would get that same sort of analysis of where there are, just because there's a crack, it doesn't mean it needs to be taken out and fixed. Some cracks are worse than others. And there would have to be kind of a detailed assessment of the neighborhood to determine what, if any, punch list of items needed to be corrected. That would be separate from the core samples. The core samples are about the asphalt.
Okay, that's what I anticipated. I wasn't quite sure, though, what we did when if we noted any potential instability that was showing up on the concrete side, but not necessarily on that asphalt side. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Kathleen. And then Mr. Little, and then let's try and have a board discussion to help us get to resolution if people are feeling like they've got their questions made. Go ahead, Mr. Little.
Thank you. So just a point, I think, we would invite, any of the board members to come out and take a look at our roads. Understand the core samples are something more technical. But today we have the Orange County recycling coming through. We have the existing trash service picking up with a many-ton vehicle. The Orange County school buses travel through our neighborhoods as well. The roads are currently withstanding. I don't know if we would be against, evaluating a hold harmless. I think we could look at that. But ultimately, we would like to move forward with this option. We would press upon you to consider that, the trash service immediately. And then if there is, the board wants to put a hold on that, I think the community here, we've got roughly 95 families in this community. We need an alternative or another option. What does the board propose, especially as it relates to the ongoing taxes that we continue to pay for those services? Would it be a credit situation that we would receive? How would we go about that process? So I know there's a lot in there that I just mentioned, but maybe we can tackle them one by one. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do board members feel like you've got your questions asked this time? Rob?
Can y'all hear me? And maybe a question for Eric, but do we know basically how much taxes we've collected from Elfin Pond since it's been built?
No, we'd have to get that information and get that back to the board. If you recall, when the issue came up with, I'm going to basically say what I said a couple months ago when Waterstone Estates came. And so for the benefit of the folks in Elfin's Pond, the first thing I said to during the Waterstone Estates discussion is like, I support moving in this direction. So it's just like in addressing the issue. But I also shared the following to add some context, whether it's Elfin's Pond, Waterstone Estates, there's some other developments that these developments may not have been approved at all had it not been for the items that we're talking about this evening. The developers made a point. This is what we agreed on: private streets, no trash collection, all of these other things. It may very well have been the town board would not have been an appealing project, and it was inconsistent with what you had done in the past. So getting back to the request for getting a refund on taxes, the town board is not, and the town attorney can correct me to clarify this issue, is that this didn't come up with the Waterstone Estates. The town board is under no legal obligation or no legal threat. This was a policy and development choice the town board made when they approved Elfin's Pond and these other places. So, and everybody that bought these properties, maybe they weren't aware when they went in, but the town hasn't changed anything. The matter of fact, it could be the property values, or probably people had a lower entry point to get in because they had to pay for the trash. It was their responsibility for the streets. So it's not like the town has pulled the rug out from under anybody's feet. Once again, I want to rewind and say, I support this, going forward, but talking about a refund on taxes, I mean, the town attorney can talk about that. I don't think there's a basis. As we were talking about this issue, going to Mr. Little's point about what's the town going to do about the trash? One, I don't know that it's our obligation. I understand they're in a bind to do that. But with that being said, I'm interested, there could be a solution trying to be equitable between Waterstone Estates and follow the same or similar process with Elfin's Pond and Waterstone and whoever else comes in, is that I'm assuming that Waterstone Estates is not finding themselves in the jam with the trash collection. So maybe there is a way, if the town was able to provide the collection, I don't know that this is relevant, but if Waterstone Estates was going to get trash in 6 months, there is a way to handle it, whether it's the residents pay the town for the cost for the 6-month period and we go and do it immediately. I'm not saying that's the right way to do it, but figuring out some way to treat everybody relatively the same.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, again, and I'm not opposed to, what happened to my screen here? To the items considered too, I feel, you guys are in a pinch and obviously want town services that you've been paying for. And, I'd like to find a way to allow us to do that. I would want a hold harmless agreement, in place if we decide to do that. And I would want, a specific date in which the dedication, would be filed. And I would want core samples to be done, but I'm certainly not opposed to starting service in advance of dedication.
All right, thank you, Rob. And then I think Kathleen and then Matt, I believe.
Okay, can you hear me? Sorry, my internet is just flaky. But anyhow, one of the things I want to clarify, because when the research was done by DCRP, which was the UNC's planning department, residential, for every dollar of residential taxes collected, the cost of delivery was $1.25, as opposed to commercial, where the cost of delivery, the every dollar received, the cost of delivery, it was 0.86. Eric, or Margaret, I don't know if you've got any other data of whether or not that ratio has changed. So I'm kind of curious about that, but typically my understanding is that residential properties, it's actually more expensive to deliver all of the services than it is what we receive. And that's one reason why we aim for that 60-40 tax ratio. So that's my first question, just to get if there's any new data in that arena to take into consideration.
I'm not aware that there's been any update on that study. It's a number of years old, but I'll call it conventional wisdom, for lack of a better statement, that most residential does not pay for itself, and that would be, single family. I don't know that they've ever drilled down deeply enough to differentiate single family from townhomes and whether there's a difference.
Okay.
Apartments are very different. So apartments act more like commercial, but I'm not aware that there's been an update. That study is probably close to 10 years old, but I'm not aware that there's been any update on that.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. In general, just in moving forward, I'd like to find a way that we can provide trash service. And for me, and from a policy standpoint, is when instead of, in the past, we've entertained the question, but it was for an individual. And in my mind, when you have 95 families, that is not an individual, but a neighborhood. And I think that is a decision point that I think has meaning. I would like also to see the hold harmless, and I would like absolutely to have those core samples, and to be very clear up front that to accept the streets, they need to be, town standards where our public works find it acceptable and are planning to find it acceptable. So that's kind of, but I would like to find a way, to provide the trash service early.
And Kathleen, while you have the floor, can I ask you, is your expectation that the neighborhood would pay for the core sampling as they are in Waterston? Okay.
Yes, because I think that is consistent. I think it's fair. And I do remember some of the discussions when this neighborhood, part of the cost analysis and that sort of thing, when this neighborhood was approved. And I do think that's fair.
Okay, thank you. Matt.
Thanks. I think there's also some other underlying issues that I know we need to probably discuss separate and apart from this issue. One of which I believe is also franchise agreements. I think we only have one franchise that is approved for the town of Hillsborough. Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, which doesn't give a lot of choice for the residents here. Therefore, in my opinion, their solid waste contractor knows they're the only approved game in town, and that's not going to be competitive in a market-based economy. And so I do think that we need to reevaluate the franchises that we give, and having a little bit of competition, because honestly, business owners are in the same boat as Elfins Pond, also in part because they too also pay taxes that they do not receive services for. And that's one reason it's very beneficial to have them. Not everyone calls 911, but everyone could conceivably receive trash service and some other services. I think that the only way, and I think that I would need staff to weigh in, and I won't say the only way, but one of the things that would weigh heavily on me in doing this is, and I don't know if the board will go along with it, and I think the liability is too high, but for these other communities that are looking to have their streets accepted as public streets, that we would give them access to trash service early. I think there could be some liability there that I'm not comfortable with. I'm not sure if this board would be willing to give hundreds of homes that service early before all the testing and whatnot is done. And I think Bob's point is very well taken to me, that the way we ensure fairness and equity is law and policy. And it may, if we went in that direction, what I'd rather see is a revision of the policy. And knowing that once these three neighborhoods, I think it's Harmony, Elfins Pond, and the Terraces, I think moving forward, Collins Ridge will be public, if I remember correctly. And then the Habitat community we approved in Millstone, Meadowlands will be public. So this is not going to be an issue, for anything new approved, if I remember correctly. But, I do want to be fair to, the other communities that are in a similar situation, as well as they're trying to get their streets accepted as public streets and receive those town services. So, and in my opinion, when everything's an exception, if everything's urgent and everything's a priority, then nothing is urgent and nothing's a priority.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, so I'm going to try and give a little roundup of where I think board members are right now. Is that there is one thing I feel is clear is that there is a desire for the neighborhood to pay for the core samples, and that the core samples need to happen before the town takes the streets over. And then there is some openness to going ahead and providing trash service, but an interest in making that equitable with what has already happened with Waterstone Terraces. That's an open question. I know, Evelyn, at the beginning of this, you said, I believe that you were saying that you wanted to stick with the policy as is, which would mean we just stick with it and we don't start doing trash pickup until we formally accept the streets after the core sampling is done. And I think, Matt, you started there, but are willing to move a little bit. Is that, Evelyn, did I capture your view correctly?
Yes, I'm not feeling great, so that's what I was talking about if we start collecting garbage, for instance, and if the streets are not, if they're ragged, if something's wrong with the streets, you also need the public utility, the public, whatever he is, to go around and check the streets and see how the streets are, if they're in good condition. Can they hold up? And we've got a lot of trash to pick up, and we're going to have more to pick up. And it sort of bothers me if you do stuff for one development, you're going to have to do it for somebody else. And there's another private street in Waterstone, and I think is that new part that was being built that was supposed to be for research at one time, and they built a lot of houses, and that was to be private. And then you got into the school bus thing. The school buses were not allowed on private roads, so you get yourself in a big mess when you want a private street. It's not simple. And besides, the town has so many streets to go through, and we have to buy so many garbage trucks that cost us money. And that has nothing to do necessarily with one development or another, but you add them all up, it's going to cost money. So you have to think about all of that. And before anybody says they want private streets, they should really get a definition of private streets.
So thank you, Evelyn. It seems to me like we have several options before us based on what people have said. Is we can just stick with the policy, say, we want to accept your streets, we're interested in that happening, but we have a policy and we're going to stick to it. Another option is to go ahead and start picking up trash, or set a time in the future that we are willing to go ahead and pick up trash that is prior to the core sampling. So I think that that's where we are. And I invite board members to help us. Kathleen.
Well, here's something I'm thinking out loud, because I want to be fair to Waterstone and where they are also. And it sounds like, if I understand correctly, they actually have paid for the core sampling, even though it hasn't occurred. If I got that right.
I think they just have sent in, they have just gotten a couple of estimates. I don't think they've actually.
Never mind. Okay, never mind.
The town is not overseeing the core sampling. The homeowners association is going out and seeking that from a firm that meets our standards and will provide those to us. We're not directly involved in that.
So you don't know if they've actually paid or not? Because I was thinking if there was a way, so that respecting Bob's advice in terms of consistency, because I think we need, what we do for one neighborhood, we need to be consistent to be fair. So I was trying to think ahead in terms of, maybe having us, if we were to do this for Elfin Pond, also doing so for Waterstone, but where it would be, that start date would be at a similar point. And I was just trying to ascertain if it was a clear point of, if Waterstone had paid for the core sampling, is that a good point to begin with service, and then have that same milestone for Elfin Pond? And I'm thinking out loud here, guys. So I'm just trying to think of a milestone that we can, if there's consensus to provide trash early, what that milestone would look like so that we can be consistent.
Gotcha. Mark.
Yeah, consistency resonates with me because I can already predict what the next conversation will be like when we're waiting streets to be formally dedicated. Margaret, can you please remind us with Waterstone, and for me in my situation, that was like 10 years ago, given my brain situation. What is the timeline from their perspective? And I think I already asked you what the timeline might be for Elfin Pond situation. And it's hard to know really, especially because so many things are being delayed in the economy. So they may order the core sampling, but it might not happen for months on end. And then who knows how long it'll take to get the results back. And then who knows how long it will take to actually negotiate, to sign all the agreements and formally dedicate the streets. But can you please remind us, for Waterstone, were there any other outlying special cases or anything that makes Waterstone analogous to Elfin Pond in their situation? I want to be fair, so I'm looking for opportunities to treat them both equally wherever possible.
No, really, the only special consideration with the terraces is that they might have some work within their homeowners association that they need to do. And because they were also approaching us on behalf of Crescent Magnolia, which has its own mechanism and a slightly different way that trash is collected. There were some minor things that would be kind of worked out at the end, but nothing truly analogous to a really poor performing trash collector or anything like that.
Thank you.
Kathleen?
I wanted to inquire because, Fury Hills has private streets now. They're so narrow, so that's its own unique situation. If memory serves, there are still partial streets in Forest Ridge that remain private and have not come under the town. And I can't think of it. I can picture it. I just can't think of the name of it. But so I want to be conscious of if we get those requests also in addition to Collins Ridge. So my question is clarity. Forest Ridge, do we still have some of those streets that we have not accepted?
We have streets that we have not accepted in Forest Ridge, but they are all intended to become public. And so all of those households are receiving service. Nothing in Forest Ridge is intended to be private.
Right.
Fiore Hill will always be private because of the way the turning radii and so forth. We cannot navigate through that neighborhood. That will always remain private. There's not a possibility there. The 3 townhome neighborhoods of Waterstone Terraces, Elfins Pond, and Harmony were all built so that trucks could maneuver through and they could offer their streets and they could be acceptable.
Okay. Thank you. What I'm thinking is that consistency.
So I'm going to suggest to our board that we probably have the information we need to come to a decision, and we just need to get ourselves there. So, sorry, Mr. Little.
Yeah, just a last comment. I know we've talked about several things in this meeting. I just want to remind the board that we are still dealing with the issue of the services that we're receiving from the waste company and their lack or inability to provide us with insurance, which leaves us in a precarious situation going forward. So please consider that as you move forward.
Thank you. Definitely does not sound like a great situation with your provider. I'm sorry that this is happening to the neighborhood. Okay, team.
I would like to make a motion. And I may need help with this, but I would like to move that we do provide trash pickup, trash service paid for by the neighborhood, that we do proceed with the core sampling to hold harmless, and that core sampling, and that is those expense again is also paid by the neighborhood. Have I left anything out?
I think probably timing, Kathleen.
Okay.
When the trash pickup should start, if that's tied at all to what's happening with Waterstone Terraces.
I would like to have, or I move, I move that can begin within in 60 days to give us time to work out get our ducks in a row, and this can be applied for Waterstone terraces with the provision that we revisit at core sampling. We revisit with the option of stopping service if the core sampling shows that the roads can't handle it. I don't think that'll be the case, but I think we need to have that mechanism. So I'm not sure how to phrase that as into the motion.
I think I believe that you just did,
Okay, cool.
by saying so. There's a Bob.
There had been some discussion about a hold harmless agreement, Kathleen.
Yes, I did include that.
Okay.
So I'm going to repeat it to be sure.
Okay, I'll try. So, moving that, yes, that we offer, that we do trash pickup paid for by the neighborhoods for it to begin within 60 days. This is applicable to Waterstone and to Elfin Pond. That there is hold harmless, that agreement is in place, and that hold harmless does need to be done pronto within 60 days. Mm-hmm. That the core sampling proceeds and the cost borne by the neighborhood. And we, in the event that the roads are shown to be substandard, we revisit next steps. What's next? We revisit this decision.
Margaret?
I have to admit, I don't understand what Commissioner Ferguson means by the trash service will be instituted at the neighborhood's expense.
Well,
what
I mean by that is we're not going to be rebating costs. We're not going to be taking money. They had a request that of the core sampling that with their taxes. So anyway, I messed that up. So I'll start over. So I see the consternation on your face.
So your motion is that
I just lost you. So I'll start over. Erase the board, and the motion being we commence trash pickup within 60 days, Waterstone, Elfin Pond. Do the core sampling. Those costs are borne by the neighborhoods. The hold harmless agreement needs to be taken care of within that pronto, and that we revisit the decision, if it turns out that the roads are substandard. Does that help you?
Yeah.
All right, we have a motion.
Sorry about that, guys. Thank you for
it's
your
a complicated,
patience.
There's a lot of parts to it.
I will second the motion, and I have questions, so I'll wait to the discussion part.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Ferguson, a second by Commissioner Bell. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Please.
Kathleen, in your motion, you included Waterstone and forgot what the second one was.
No, it was just Waterstone and Elfin Pond, because both receive the same level of service. I don't think.
Sorry, go ahead.
As I understand, since they're both in the mid-process where the streets have not been conveyed over, there are different points in the process of the sampling and that sort of thing. But for each, in the attempt to be fair and equitable to Waterstone as well as Elfin Pond, is that we offer and provide that same level of service, which is the trash pickup, before the sampling's done.
Okay, I really like the idea of treating the neighborhoods the same. And can I also add that all indications are that the construction of the streets in the neighborhoods are likely to yield a passing test, so they eventually would be conveyed. And because this process could drag on so long, that seems like a reasonable thing to do. If this were a process that was like, this happens all the time, it only takes 90 days or a month, I would say probably just wait until the streets are completely conveyed to the town to start. But I think there are circumstances that would lead me to agree with that, and to also think that I don't know if we officially need to change the policy, Bob, on that, but I'm open to that discussion at another time. So that seems fair.
Is there further discussion? Rob?
So just for clarity's sake, are we saying that we will begin trash service within 60 days? And-
That's the motion on the floor. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And Margaret, does that give us enough time? You said we could turn that around fairly quick. It seems like that's a reasonable time, or?
Yeah, I think as soon as we have some sort of hold harmless in place, and as soon as we have enough trash carts, we'll start.
Okay.
And we don't have enough for both neighborhoods, but we have them on order, and they'll be here in less than 60 days. And as soon as we get a better count on that from Dustin, we can share that with the neighborhood. But I would think that the hold harmless needs to be in place first. I'm interpreting between the lines.
I did state that the hold harmless needs to be in place.
And is there a third community that we're leaving out of this that I think Matt mentioned?
Harmony at Waterstone has not approached us yet, so they haven't started through the process yet. And I would guess when we get to them, we will extend them the same sort of, we'll start the trash service sooner, but we'll see when we get a chance to reach out to them.
Thank you.
Mark?
And Margaret, in addition to everything we've talked about, are there any other capacity issues on the part of the town that would prevent us from carrying through with what we're describing? I mean, is there enough truck capacity? Is there enough people capacity to do this? Anything that would prevent us from proceeding at this time?
No, because we have enough, like we did the report when Cornelis was here and let you know about, before we made the decision on Waterstone, we let you know that there's enough capacity with both vehicles and people to roll this out. We're not looking to hire or buy a new truck to absorb this and the rest of Collins Ridge. So that's one reason why now is a good time to do this.
Mr. Little, did you have a question?
Just a quick comment that I'm not sure if this is a liability issue, but we already have our own carts, the bins. So I don't want that to delay your implementation in our neighborhood. But you can comment on that piece, but we all have them, they're all owned.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what kind of truck your contractor is currently using, but our guys came out and attempted to pick up one of your carts and just about squashed it. So they are absolutely unwilling to use the carts that you currently have, that they are too flimsy for the one-armed bandit that we have. Maybe it's our guys. I don't want to say one way or another, but we do have a good stock of carts, and we just can't quite cover both neighborhoods. So we'll be there just as quickly as we can.
Eric?
Thank you. Question for Margaret on Waterstone Estates. If we call them tomorrow and say, hey, we're going to start picking your trash up in 60 days, I'm assuming they're locked in with a contractor for a certain amount of time, like most contracts. And hypothetically, they say, oh, well, thanks a whole lot, but our contract is locked in until July. Do we know the status of where they're at?
We don't know the status for Waterstone Terraces, but they've been working their way through this to try and get, and they kind of had the end of the year in their line. So certainly if they're locked into a contract, we're not going to ask them to break that and have some expense and we would just serve Elfins Pond first, but I can, share that information with them. They may not be interested in doing the hold harmless agreement. I'm interpreting from the guidance from the direction from the board that we should work with the community and offer them the same thing, but if they choose not to accept it, then we'll continue down the path that we're headed. So we'll take all those things into account, and I'm hoping that Bob's gonna get us a hold harmless agreement really fast.
And to clarify, yes, we're offering, we're not holding a gun to their heads.
Is there any more discussion?
I have one other thing, and that is, and thank you, Commissioner Hughes, because I do want us to join in that the franchise agreements. I would like to see that on an agenda, sooner than later.
All right, Eric.
Just a quick comment. As far as the franchise agreement, I think that got updated sometime within the last year, and it's usually 3 years. We can get back to you. And I know the board, I've been lobbying for over 20 years to stop doing it the way we've been doing it. But the feedback we've got from the Chamber of Commerce and everybody else is like, no, we like the exclusive franchise, but for some of the reasons that were stated tonight, I think there's less government involvement, less bureaucracy, gives people's choice. And when they don't we hear this all the time, people don't like a provider, then they can go to somebody else. And a lot of these people are in town anyway. So I'm all for going to a non-exclusive franchise. Just wanted to chime in while I could. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. All right, if there is no further discussion, we can roll call the vote.
Commissioner Bell,
Aye.
Commissioner English,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
No.
Commissioner Lloyd,
No,
The motion passes. Thank you, everybody. That was that's a complicated situation. Thank you for bearing with us and all the questions, and staff, thank you for helping us navigate that. And thank you, Mr. Little, and your group there with you for coming in and bearing with us tonight.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 6B, we have a master plan modification request from Collins Ridge to provide affordable housing land offsite and to relocate the Greenway. Margaret is bringing several people into the room.
Yeah, so we have Chip with us from Criterion Development. We've got Rachel from CASA. Bobby Stewart from DR Horton is also available, as is Dan Jewell, the architect who is helping CASA. I've just brought Chip and Rachel in right now, but the other two are available. And if somebody wants, if Chip or Rachel want me to bring the others in, just let me know. And so this is following up on a discussion we had in April to formalize a need to relocate the Greenway and amend the master plan to reflect that, and then also to consider the possibility of allowing the affordable housing piece to move offsite in Collins Ridge to still meet its requirements. And those two things were both noted in the master plan, and so an amendment to the master plan would be needed to allow these two things to happen. And I'm not sure how Bob got moved out of the audience, so let me bring him back in. But I think I'll stop there and see how many questions there are, since we did talk about this, but it's been a number of months. And then we'll see whether it's better for me to answer those questions or Chip or Rachel or somebody else.
That sounds fine. Margaret, do you want me to drive the train or do you want to drive the train?
Why don't you keep driving, because
All
I'm
right.
still not sure that I'm going to hear at the right time.
Gotcha. No problem. I got it. And so we've been, I think we're all glad to be seeing this item. We've been expecting it to come back. I know it's, all parties are frustrated and a bit disappointed that this set of Casa homes has to be moved. But it is the situation we are dealing with, and we've got to think about how to move forward. So Kathleen, go for it.
Yeah. Yes, I have a couple questions. One, I want to make sure Casa is fully on board with this. My priority is Casa. So that's my first question. And the second question is that it may be for Margaret, is that with moving these homes, I would like to see that to be green space, but no more homes added in that space.
That would be a different amendment that would need, so you're asking them to set aside the 3 acres within Collins Ridge and not build on it?
Not build on, in other words, or they can rearrange deck chairs, but no more, we approved X number of houses, no more houses. Just because they're moving Casa over doesn't mean they can go add more houses in the space. So in other words, it was 1,038 units total, if or 83 if memory serves, of the entire Collins Ridge, inclusive of Casa. So moving Casa out leaves space. However, what I'm saying is that doesn't mean they get to add more houses. So even rearranging the deck chairs, okay, but I would prefer to see, I just want to make sure it's like they're moving out Casa, and Casa's happy with that. And 2, we're not adding more houses.
Okay, I see what you're saying, that the project is still capped at the number of dwelling units, that we might need to add one more whereas to the resolution.
Okay.
Or just to clarify that, so that in a couple years, if I'm not here, somebody doesn't have to go back and look at the minutes. We make sure that we have it captured. But I'll let Rachel speak for Casa.
Okay. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, good evening. I figured I'd take a moment to introduce myself. My name's Rachel Eberhard, and I am Casa's real estate developer. So I've been working on this project since May. And I think from our perspective, our approach with the development program is going to intend to apply for the low-income housing tax credit for this particular project. And I think the challenges we kind of ran into were just constraints that were placed on the project site as it kind of was laid out with the qualified allocation plan through the Housing Finance Agency. So ultimately, Criteria and CHIP's team proposed this site, which worked from a scoring perspective. I think from Casa's point of view, we were just wanting to make sure that the connectivity was still maintained with the larger development. And so we have a proposed connection down to Freeland Memorial. We just really were concerned that we would just kind of be off to the side here, and that our residents would not necessarily have as direct access to some of the amenities and the greater neighborhoods. So I guess I can maybe ask CHIP to provide perspective on their end, kind of how they arrived at deciding that this site would be a good spot for us. But I'm happy to answer any other questions. And then we have also our project engineer, Dan Jewell, as well as our Director for Real Estate Development, Jess Brandis, on as well for any questions. So thank you.
Hi, Jess. Hi, Dan. But again, what I'm not clear with, I hear that and I understand that, there were some issues of why, for the tax credit. But again, I want to be very clear. Is this a site you're happy with? My personal, this is your project is critically important for this community, and its success is paramount. And so, I want to make sure that this site meets all of the needs for CASA and for its residents, and I totally agree that the residents need to be fully integrated into the greater community, have access, and of course, the permanently affordable. So that I just want some assurance that CASA is satisfied and it meets your criteria.
Yeah, and in discussions that we've had, and we've been working on this for months now, we're happy with the site. I think as it's laid out with the 2 connection points and the criteria that Margaret had drawn up, CASA is satisfied with where this proposed project is within the community. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate that.
Other questions or comments? Bob?
Rachel, did you say that there is a direct connection to Freeland Drive? Because the sketch that's in my packet doesn't show that connection. I just want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing.
Bob, I see Chip has unmuted himself, so maybe he would like to speak to that.
Yes, Mayor Jen, I'm sorry. So we had, can you all hear me okay?
Now we can.
Okay. So to Bob's point, we initially saw a version from CASA that had the site slid over a little bit more toward the Freeland Memorial Drive extension through Daniel Boone. We had actually proposed, and I think there was maybe some confusion on this, but had proposed a connection point directly onto a public street in what will be our phase 1B at Collins Ridge. And so we moved it for a variety of reasons, or actually it was our initial proposal, and I guess we slid it back from where CASA had it, with the understanding that there would be that direct connection point into the public phase 1B street that's actually closer to the amenities in the closest proximity for direct connectivity. But also we would agree to provide at a future point in time, as Daniel Boone develops, there will certainly be a greater padded area that will also allow that second connection point onto Freeland Memorial. In the interim, for fire protection purposes, we would at least provide a gravel access off of Freeland Memorial for a second fire and emergency vehicle access point.
Thank you, Chip. Does that answer your question, Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, because the map that's with my packet, at least, and probably with everyone's, shows the direct connection to Sea Trail Street in Collins Ridge, but really kind of just shows a stub out to the south, I guess it is, off of I'll say the ring road on the CASA property. And I just want to make sure that we're all clear on what CASA is getting from Collins Ridge. And that is, to my understanding, based on what Chip just said, the Sea Trail connection plus an assured connection to James Freeland Memorial Drive. And I mean, It's not on my plan. I just want to make sure it's recorded somewhere that that's what CASA is entitled to.
Thank you, Bob. That does feel important. And would it be appropriate to add that into the whereas, add a whereas clause about that in the resolution?
The map is meant to attach to the resolution, and the map does have that note there that says future connection to Freeland Memorial Drive, right there where that driveway is. So
You think it,
think
okay,
that-
great. Mark.
Yeah, a couple of comments and questions. The first one is what you provided in the packet is a detail of the plan, but we're not seeing kind of the full plan here. So my first question was kind of along Kathleen's comments, which was, what was the plan for the original site, which I think was like parcel B that we approved in 2015, 2016. So did you have another plan for that? Because I too share the concern that I don't want to add additional 88 houses. I just would like to see plan parcel B moved over to this new location. I'm okay with the Greenway proposed changes. And I wanted to go on record saying that, mindful of the original discussion, which I know that the current developer was not party to originally, but we went to, great lengths to articulate that we really wanted to see the affordable housing units fully embraced and incorporated into the Collins Ridge community. And when it was part of parcel B, it only had one side that would be facing the commercial, the future commercial development area. And now it has 2 or 3 sides facing. So there could be a significant loss of the quality of life depending on what kinds of businesses get placed up against those residential units. So I'm mindful that this is not nearly as desirable as parcel B, but I understand that parcel B has issues with the power lines and not being able to get funded for affordable housing. So that leads to the question of, I guess you have looked at all the other places in the master plan. So are you saying that there is no other place to put these 88 affordable housing units within the boundaries of the original Collins Ridge that we approved 4 or 5 years ago? And so it has to be put into what is now the zone to commercial. And that's it.
Go ahead, Chip, if you want to respond to Mark's questions.
So Commissioner Bell, we took a look at our options and believe this to be the most consistent option with at least what we knew. And again, as you stated, we weren't a party to those original discussions with the former developer, but we tried to keep it relatively consistent, looked at closest proximity to the prior location, and even felt that I guess it's debatable, but this could even be potentially a better location from the standpoint of if you want to look at things like live work desirability, to where potentially some of the CASA inhabitants might be able to work down within the commercial area that hopefully will be in Daniel Boone at some point, that this may even be a more desirable location than the initial, but we tried to at least get in close proximity to the physical location that was originally envisioned.
Thank you, Chip. Mark, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Rob?
Thank you, Jen. So I really wish there was a way to fully integrate this into the residential development. I feel, even though you stated that you feel this is the best place for it, I think by having it in a commercial area, and you want to, integrate it or say it can be integrated as best possible, it just doesn't feel like, I'm not feeling that. So, and the other part that bothers me is we're losing 3 acres of commercial space that could potentially, been utilized for commercial purposes. So I think, but you were answering Commissioner Bell was you looked at you said that you tried to remain, in close proximity to where the original area was planned for, but is there any other place in the residential area that this could work?
Well, we had further constraints, and I guess Rachel can confirm this, but and it may have actually been Jess who worked through these, but we had constraints with I-85 and the railroad as well. So we were very limited in what from the funding criteria would be available. So there were other challenges with adjacent features to Collins Ridge that precluded a lot of other areas. And again, we felt like this was the most consistent fit. I will point out that we are no longer backing up to a power line that to me would not have been necessarily desirable the first time out, but you sort of have some trade-offs there. And then this location keeps sort of the same proximity to the amenities. And so not saying that there isn't physically somewhere that might work, but I think largely we also had platted 1A lots, phase 1A lots that would have been a possibility, but that ship had sort of sailed already at that point.
And then a couple other things. Again, I'm fine with the Greenway reconfiguration. It just bothers me a little bit that that it just isn't in the residential part of development. But if CASA's happy with it, then I'm happy with it. But I also don't want to see any additional dwelling or units in the 3 acres or where we move that from. So I'm not down with adding more to that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Good points and questions have been raised. I think that one thing that does feel really good is just taking it back to what Kathleen brought up at the beginning was that that CASA seems happy, and that seems really paramount to the situation, because that was certainly a big condition of all of this happening in the first place. Kathleen, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, I actually was going to make a motion to approve, provided that the units are capped at the current level, and that stipulation that it is fully acceptable with CASA, and there are truly no other options available in the Collins Ridge community.
I will note that, thank you for making the motion. I will note that the resolution before us is it's a joint request from CASA and the developer is the way the resolution is phrased. So do you feel like it's inherent in there that CASA is
Yes.
happy? Okay. All right.
Yes,
Just wanted to be sure.
my priority is, this is one of the most important, to me, this is the most important feature of Collins Ridge. And this is critically important for our community. CASA is bringing something that our community does not have. And if they are not fully satisfied, in my opinion, we have wasted time.
Agreed. So we've got a motion on the floor. Margaret?
Well, go ahead and get the second, because I'm just trying to figure out how to operationalize what
All right.
Commissioner Ferguson is asking for.
It means CASA really, I mean, this is why I ask, is CASA can say, yes, we really are happy for real. And the developer, really, no kidding, you can't find, out of all of this acreage, you can't find a place to integrate them into the community.
Well, I hear what you're saying completely. And had we had the program requirements 2 years ago, then I would not be supporting an offsite site. But
Fair enough.
At the point that it was clearly made known to the town and Collins Ridge what the spacing requirements were from the funding program, by that point, the ship had sailed.
Okay.
On too many other locations, and with all of the spacing requirements, I mean, CASA did the analysis. There were houses there already. But what I don't want to, what I'm questioning is, how do we memorialize that to satisfy the board? Is this discussion and it living in the minutes sufficient, or do you want us to add whereases to this resolution that is?
Now, I do want to whereas that CASA is, that CASA has, this site has, met, their vetting and full satisfaction. The rest of the minutes will suffice.
So actually, to meet that, I think we would need either two whereases or one compound one that says CASA is satisfied with the location, and then to just say, to reiterate that the dwelling unit cap approved otherwise in the master plan is still in place.
Correct.
And it looks like Bob wants to wordsmith something. Maybe he's been working on it.
Bob, you're muted.
Sometimes it's better that I'm muted. But anyway, that's a joke, everybody. A lame one, maybe, but.
Hey, we're laughing.
There are a couple of whereas clauses right now. Whereas the developer and CASA have jointly requested the town board to amend condition 3 to allow the approximate 3.5 acre tract adjacent site meet the affordable housing commitment of the developer. We might just put comma, which 3.5 acre site meets CASA's approval.
That works for me.
Because I think that memorializes the fact that they have represented to us that 3.5 acre site is satisfactory to CASA.
Yes.
And I think that ought to handle that aspect.
That's perfect. And then if we have a separate whereas that caps the units.
I think we need to add one that just says that the dwelling unit cap remains in place, is not affected by this modification or something to that.
Okay, so we've got a motion.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ferguson, and a second by Commissioner Bell. We've wordsmithed where to put it. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we can roll call the vote.
Commissioner Bell,
Aye.
Commissioner English,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Commissioner Lloyd,
And it is approved unanimously. Once again, thank you for sticking through. Thank you for being with us tonight, Chip, and thank you also, Rachel.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We're looking forward to this project.
We are super excited about it. Let us know when you want to start a second project. We're we're eager for you.
Of course. Have a good evening.
You too. Now we have item 6C. To continue the board discussion on returning to in-person meetings. We've agreed to have this just to check in monthly. I had the chance to check in with the town manager last week. It sounds like town operations aren't coming back to in-person just yet. I know that our neighboring jurisdictions are not coming back to in-person just yet. And I heard Quintana Stewart talking about how the things are certainly, there are signs that things are improving. We're not quite there yet. So here we are. Any particular comments or questions that people have? Go ahead, Kathleen.
My comments actually mirror what from last month in that in support of the healthcare system. I think meeting remotely is prudent and best supports public safety.
Thank you, Kathleen. Mark?
Yeah, I agree with those comments. And I was looking at the NC DHHS heat map of kind of where the state is as a whole, and noticed that Orange County had twice as many active cases as Durham, and 3 times as Alamance, and 12 times as many per 100,000 as Chatham. And I'm not sure if that is incorporating the fact that there's a level 1, tertiary health system in Chapel Hill where these patients are coming, or if these are cases in the general population of Orange County. But I guess overall, I'm not seeing that it's too much better, if at all, than last month. So I'm in favor of waiting another month, and let's see how things look.
Thank you, Mark. And to your point, I do believe that's because of the hospitals that we have here. But the other thing that the health director also said is that we still remain in, the whole state remains red, I believe, in the state of measuring this red. So, Rob.
Similar to last month. I mean, I'm not opposed to meeting in person. I go in every day. I go out. I think it can be done safely. But I also recognize that everybody else has to be, at that place too. And I certainly respect where everybody is individually. And so I'm not necessarily advocating for it, but I'm certainly not opposed to it.
Thank you, Rob. Any other comments on this item? Okay. Moving on to item 6D, which is to check in about any possible conditions that might need to be placed on the permit for the holiday parade, seeing as the permit says it could attract as many as 4,000 people. And because there are some unknowns about what COVID might do, we hope it will be improved, but we can't be sure. Commissioner Bell.
I think maybe Evelyn was trying to speak first, so I'll defer, Evelyn, to you if you have something to comment on.
No, I didn't have anything to say yet.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just concerned about kind of seeing, having attended so many parades, that if their estimate is normally 4,000 people come, but even if, just 1,000 people came and lined the streets elbow to elbow, it's going to be difficult to distance. So I would like that if we're going to approve that request, that we put in some kind of safety valve. So if we're even further in the red come December the 5th, that we we have a reasonable timeline to let the parade organizers know that it's not safe to do so. I would not be in support of having carte blanche to hold the parade with, you know, more than 1,000 people attending, and only about 2 months from now. So yeah, open to what other people think about how we can work to protect the general population, but also facilitate the parade if possible.
Thank you, Mark. And I see that Shannon is here. So Shannon, why don't you offer your 2 cents?
Sure.
Or 10 cents as the case may be.
I'm our special event expert these days, for better or for worse. I think the parade is an interesting kind of case. You know, we did approve the Tar Wheels bike event, and that is coming up. And basically how we've approached these is that they're conditioned that they have to follow all state, local, and, you know, CDC mandated guidelines for gatherings and events that are in place at the time of the event. I think it's hard to put any kind of a threshold or a pressure valve or a limit on this kind of event, because what's going to happen is that, you know, people are going to start registering for it. They're going to pay for their floats. A lot of time, money, and energy goes to organizing the event. So I think this is going to be a really tricky one outside of just that condition, you know, that people are going to have to recognize the 3 Ws. They're going to have to try and social distance along the route. One thing that I will point out is that the route is actually pretty long. It starts up at Town Hall at the north end of town, and it ends down in front of the new courthouse. What we've seen in previous years is that people just tend to kind of group up and bundle up in downtown. I think that the event organizers have a plan to just try and get people to disperse and get them to, you know, walk if they can a little bit up further to put out their chairs. Because I think that is a concern. You know, we don't want people bundled up the way they have in years past, but I don't anticipate that they will do that given the fact that we have all been in lockdown working from home for so long. And so I think there's a fair amount of general caution from the public to try and stay away from each other to the extent that we can. And I don't know that we're going to see the numbers that we've seen in past years just because people are so cautious. But if Commissioner Bell or any of the other commissioners has any ideas on how we can structure this or condition this in a way that calls for more public safety, you know, we can always add any conditions to this. But I think it's going to be challenging to cancel the event like a week ahead of time or something like that.
Thank you, Shannon. It is what you said about that they're being asked to agree to any mandates that are in place at the time. That does feel important. So thank you for letting us know that. Kathleen.
Have we had a conversation about this event with the health department or on their thoughts? And what are other communities that have the same that have had the same safety protocols in place as we have? How are they handling this? Because I feel a little bit in a vacuum on this kind of event, because so much of it, it's not an enclosed space, but at the same time, people do congregate downtown, and it could be a super spreader event easily. And that, it's an important event for the community, and it's an important event that creates community. And I'm a little nervous.
I think that's valid. The only other community that I've talked to of late is the city of Mebane, and they are planning right now on moving forward with their holiday parade and kind of with the same PR and messaging, stay 6 feet apart, go with your pod, try and distance along the route, wear a mask if you can't be 6 feet apart. There is a lot. I mean, right now it's up in the air, but there is a lot of strong scientific evidence that being outdoors does help lower that transmission rate, but you do still need to stay away from other people. And we definitely can't have people on top of each other like we have in years past.
Yeah, no, definitely outside makes a difference, but when you are close together, it gets back to that. And if you're, people sing and they're yelling, and it's sort of like the church, and then you get extra transmission. But anyhow, no, thank you for the clarity.
Rob.
I mean, I'm in support of this. I think I think our community needs it. I think we can do it in a smart way. I would like, Shannon, to have that conversation. It sounds like you've already begun with the event organizers to figure out how we can spread out and use more of the, the route as opposed to everybody congregating, and really have a positive message that that we need to be smart about this, and that we can do that if we spread out and wear masks and stay in your pod, or and I think the health department can help with that messaging too. But I feel that that we can do this safely, and I think the event organizers can help with that message. So where does that 4,000, 3,500, is that a typical year sort of attendance numbers? Okay. Because I also think that it won't be a typical year numbers. But there's a lot of pent up people too. So maybe they'll come out, but.
Thank you, Rob. Matt.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with moving this forward with the proper safety protocols, whatever those happen to be. I think for the most part, it'd probably be whatever's in the governor's executive order, more than likely. So I'm fine with that. Of course, we know there's been in other jurisdictions things like a Rolling Stones concert in Charlotte, which I didn't know there were so many large concerts starting back already. So, whatever is in place at the time. I don't think we can tell people are going to have to make the best decisions for themselves. It's going to be really hard to, enforce things like standing 6 feet apart or whatnot, but making sure that it's in the messaging that's provided, that, we don't need to be 5 people, 6 people deep on a sidewalk down Churton Street. That's just uncomfortable in general. Spread out. It is a pretty lengthy, parade route. So hopefully, folks do, exercise that kind of caution and judgment. So.
Thank you, Matt. Any other questions or comments about this event, how it might unfold? Matt, is your hand still up, or is it back down? All right, Kathleen.
Do you need a motion? What do you need? Because I move to support this, because I think it's important for the community, and it's a community. It is quintessential small town USA. It's so important. So I make the motion to support with extra messaging. The concerts are coming about because they require proof of vaccination. We can't, you can do that in an indoor arena. You can't do that on outdoors. So we just need extra messaging to ensure safety.
And I believe that the ask is what's before us is to approve the permit. So is your motion to approve the permit?
The motion is to approve the permit, but with extra messaging of safety. We don't want, that's all.
A second.
All right, moved by Kathleen, seconded by Rob. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none, I just want to say thank you, Mark, for just asking this to be pulled and talked about, because I do think I feel better now that we have talked about it. So appreciate that. And thank you for joining us, Shannon. And we can roll call the motion before us.
Commissioner Bell,
Aye.
Commissioner English,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Commissioner Lloyd,
And the motion is approved unanimously. Moving on to item number 6E, I believe. 6E is some discussion of, we've been asked to endorse the updated historic district design standards. This is not a requirement. The town board has no, we don't have authority to change these design standards as a body. But I was interested in pulling this off to make there were a few comments that I wanted to put into the record on this. And I think other members of the board might have some comments to make as well. The first comment I wanted to make is a thank you to the HDC, to the Historic District Commission, for all the work that they've done on this. I do find the document easier to navigate than the old one. That's a big improvement. And also, I really appreciate the new language that's in the section that does the background about Hillsborough and our local history. It is much more inclusive of our history, including some of the unsavory parts that we, over the past few years have tried to do a better job of telling and owning. So I have a deep appreciation for that. Then there were a couple of other things I just wanted to make note of for the commission. One of them is that Hillsborough, it comes up every single day that just we have a everyday worsening affordable housing problem. And sometimes we think about the district as a neighborhood where it's, only expensive large houses. It is true that new housing is of that type, but the neighborhood is not like that. There's lots of modest housing, people who want to be able to stay in their houses. And so just an urging for the commission to think about the guidelines and how, if there are any ways to make construction or updates less financially arduous, so that we are able to have a variety of socioeconomic diversity within the district. And then the other thing I wanted to comment on is to strongly urge the commission to consider future updates to the guidelines that make it more possible to have solar panels throughout the district. This was something that was discussed in the town's clean energy resolution that we passed several years ago. We have ambitious goals as a town government, and I know just enough to know that this same issue is coming up in historic districts and other places across the country. And so far, there doesn't seem to be a lot of movement on that. There could be some that I don't know about, but that there's a real opportunity here for Hillsborough to be a leader as a community that values both preservation and addressing the climate crisis, because we are in a climate crisis. This is urgently important, and that there's a role for every entity to play. And I hope that the commission will consider that in the very near future, because sooner or later, fossil fuels will not be a viable way to be heating and cooling our homes. So in one sense, it feels inevitable. And I'm going to stop there and see if others have comments they would like to make. And Kathleen, I see your hand raised.
Yes, and thank you for those comments, because I want to echo two in particular. The first, our clean energy resolution. If we are serious about that clean energy resolution, then every single solitary board, commission, committee, our decision-making, we need to take that into consideration. And it's a key component of sustainability. So I thank you, Mayor Jen, for raising that. And I second the urgency of allowing for, solar panels, wind, alternative energy in the historic district. That is, we have air conditioning, so we might as well also keep up with the times from this perspective. Secondly, again, on the affordability of repairs, because a lot of repair programs, it's very difficult to do because you can't, it's hard to do in a historic district because of those costs and everything that's entailed. And it's not fair to those residents to be locked out of some of those programs because of the arduousness of the repair requirements. So that too, again, I just echo, there's got to be a way to be flexible and to support, families of modest incomes. So thank you for that. And my third comment is just in general of if there were any other concerns that, Jen, Evelyn, and you, Mark, given you reside and live you live under these regulations, do you have other concerns or recommendations?
Thank you, Kathleen. And I think I will just answer and say I've expressed the gist of what I was interested in expressing in regards to the updated guidelines, but thank you. And I'll pass it to you, Mark.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just say that in my 8.5 years on the HDC, I saw a lot of creativity by homeowners and updating of the design, usually the materials. I think that's where a lot of people run into difficulty with the design. Now they're called design standards. I call them design guidelines for 8.5 years, so it's a hard habit to break. Kind of the constant struggle, tension between wanting to do something that is modern yet, and putting solar panels on the front of houses, for example. But the underlying thing for the whole historic district and the design standards are following the Department of the Interior standards. And for homeowners to get tax credits for preservation products, you have to do it according to those Department of Interior standards. So our local standards, they're just really following the Department of the Interior standards. And if you don't do that, then you're not eligible for tax credit. So there's a balance and a kind of a constant review of adding new materials to the approved materials list wherever possible. They're like manufactured materials. Some of which are now allowed. So I recognize that there's a constant struggle to preserve things in kind of historical context and keeping within Department of Interior guidelines. But right now, they do not permit some of the things that we're talking about in terms of solar panels and wind turbines and things like that on character defining elevations. So it's we can't always put it where we want, but got to follow those federal standards or there's no tax credits. So, and I think that's the only comment that I really have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That's a helpful reminder. Rob?
I just want to echo what Mayor Weaver and Commissioner Ferguson said too, and it sounds like it's a very contradictory, well, not really contradictory, but it's a tough balance between climate action and historical preservation and what can really be done. It sounds like at the local level, and thank you for sharing that, Mark. But I would encourage you to continue to poke them into any ways that that the guidelines can be updated or expanded upon or whatever for us to get to where we want to be, because eventually it's going to it's going to be one or the other. And I think the it's very urgent that we continue to do everything that we can to reduce fossil fuels dependency. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Matt.
Oh, I want to echo some of what Commissioner Bell said, actually, because I had the opportunity to meet with Jill Howellman on Saturday, rather. She was very generous with her time. I kind of wanted to know, what was I voting on, and in endorsing and really looking at the differences between the previous set of standards and the new set of standards. Of course, it's more readable. There's greater clarification. The standards are ostensibly the same. It's just in a different format that's more user-friendly and combines some other resources. Reached out to Margaret to say, hey, Margaret, do you have a comparison document of what was and what is now the standards? And she said, well, I don't know. And unfortunately, Justin had just recently left us, Justin Snyder. So Jill helped walk me through the document and understand the improvements and the changes. And I think they're very good. And, I remember looking at the old guidelines and, I won't say I was bored to tears, but I may have been pretty bored to tears. But the new standards definitely are more readable. There's a lot of color, there's a lot of examples, there's a lot of just better resources for folks that make it a one-stop shop. I will say, and I don't know if Margaret or Bob could speak to this, and I don't want us to have to micromanage this, but it did strike me as odd to need to, or to have a document that has pretty much the force of law to come before us for an endorsement, but didn't need to come before us for approval. And I don't know if I want us moving forward to need to approve changes to that document, but it strikes me as, it is a quasi-judicial body, and as such decisions can be appealed through the process that we've outlined in the UDO. But if we could, I would feel better that if there are standards people are being subject to that have the force of law, that us as a governing body have to approve those changes from time to time. But that's just something that I feel pretty strongly about, because I do get concerns about the standards from folks, and it's like, well, that they never come before us. And to me, a lot of folks don't accept that answer very easily. So but I don't know about the process for that, if that's even something that's allowed under General Statute 160D. But that was just a question. But I'm in favor of endorsing the guidelines today. I'm just thinking about towards the future.
Thank you, Matt. And then I see Bob has his hand up too. So
just 2 or 3 quick points. First, addressing Matt's point, 160D 947C says the HDC makes the rules in the historic district. It's a matter of statute. Secondly, the HDC, the standard that they're supposed to apply is congruity with the district, okay? And congruity sometimes can be in the eye of the beholder, but as a general rule, I mean, they're trying to preserve the character of the district. And I can tell you that over I go to almost every HDC meeting, and I don't want to say they struggle with, but they're very conscious of kind of the opposing forces sometimes, if you will, of congruity with the district and trying to stay up with the times. For example, solar panels and the like. There's a tension there that they struggle with. And there was one more point that I was going to make that has now slipped my mind, but I guess it wasn't that important. But I just wanted to make those few points. I mean, the HDC is very conscious of the tension. They try to address it. Solar panels are in fact allowed in the district. So if anyone tells you they're not, they're mistaken. And the last point I wanted to make with respect to some materials there's now a materials matrix at the end of these historic district standards. And that matrix has been updated considerably. And it does in fact allow more options now, including favoring recycled materials than it allowed before a year or so ago. So we're making slow strides there. You know, that commission, they do a great job and they work hard. And these standards are a huge improvement over what we had before that.
Thank you, Bob. And I completely agree that the commission works very hard and they do struggle with those tensions in the few meetings that I've attended. And I also think, additional thanks to them for the work they did on these updated standards. See, I said the right word that time. Mark has now trained me. And I also think that as a town board, you know, our job also is to, you know, encourage our advisory boards to, you know, we really want to, we've got some a mission and values we're really trying to act on. And so I think having these conversations back and forth, even if it's just putting things on the public record in this way, is part of our job as well. And so thank you for all the comments that have been made here tonight on this. And I would urge the board to endorse the recommendations as requested.
I'm
Mark.
willing to
Oh,
make that-
sorry.
Oh,
Wait,
sorry.
hold on. Evelyn had her hand up and sometimes I miss her because she doesn't use the raised hand.
This has nothing to do with building really, but I don't like to see all this clear cutting of trees. And also people are killing birds and people are killing squirrels in my neighborhood and I do not like it. And I have to see them shoot, but I hear it. And that to me is not good. And animals help the climate, and you don't see as many. If you cut everything back, then the butterflies have no place to go. All of these things and the bees and all that we read about. I bet I subscribe to 30 organizations, way too many, and then get more material, wanting more money. But you got to be careful about letting plants grow and what you use the fertilizer and all that type stuff goes into it too. Is not everybody I'm not likely to have solar panels, and I don't want to go through that having them done. But there are people who can afford to do it, I suppose. But that's my main point, and I think probably people think but that's sort of silly. But things are clean. If you look at the streets and everything is clean, and there's less trash out on the streets, and you got recycling, and I've really Public Works is really good, and I think the mowing crew is good, and so that keeps it looking nice. And all those things can be thrown into climate change too, and also throwing plastic stuff out into the water and to kill the fish and whatever.
Thank you, Evelyn. I think you're exactly right. Keeping our in-town wildlife in good shape is really, really important to our local environment as well. Mark.
I just wanted to make a motion.
Please.
And I typed something out. I move that we endorse the updated design standards and to encourage the Historic District Commission to continue to consider the town's clean energy goals and the Department of Interior standards for incorporating energy producing and energy saving technologies in a designated local historic district.
I second.
It was a race. I heard Matt's voice first. So moved by Mark, seconded by Matt. Is there any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, we can roll call the vote.
Commissioner Bell,
Aye.
Commissioner English,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Commissioner Lloyd,
Uh,
And that motion is passed unanimously. Thank you for crafting that, Mark, very much. And now we have moved on to item 6F, which is hot topics for our work session on October 25th. We have several hot topics that might be coming our way for the workshop. Enforcement options for the NDO adopted in January, considering the House America initiative, and talking some about the new town board email signatures. Does staff feel like these are all items we can handle on that agenda with whatever else might be in the hopper? Okay. Erica's nodding yes. And Mark, I see you have your hand up. Kathleen, I just wanted to ask you, you haven't had your meeting yet. Do you anticipate having more information after about the House? Okay.
Yes. And also with respect to the NDO that Matt has brought forward, I've got a meeting with Equality NC and their attorneys to hear their perspective of enforcement. And so, we'll have information should that, if there's anything new or different than what Matt has, certainly we'll be glad to share.
Great, thank you. And then there you are, Mark. You moved on my screen. Was that an old hand up, or did you have your hand up? Or that's an old one? Okay, gotcha. Anything else? Hot topics? Okay. Then we'll move on to updates. And in the interest of time, I want to note it's 9:30 and we've had a long, full meeting. So let's try to keep these complete yet brief. And I will start with you, Evelyn. Do you have any updates?
I think I told it the last time that the fire department, the Orange Rural Fire Board voted to actually use the land at Waterstone to build the fire department. And we have a meeting the 20th, which I'll hear more about it. But I think it'll be done. I don't know how AMS and the fire department are going to get along yet. I haven't heard anything. The audit was okay. And that's about it. I mean, they argued and, about various things, and it was a good meeting. If you don't keep up, you can't miss a meeting because we don't have good minutes like we do here. So you miss a meeting and boy, you're in for it. You don't know what they tried to pull over my eyes.
That's right. That's why we need you to stay at those meetings, Evelyn.
Yeah.
Thank you. Rob.
I don't. Intergovernmental Parks Work Group and Orange County Climate Council are meeting the next couple of weeks, and I think SWAG too. So I don't have anything to report tonight, though.
Thank you, Mark.
I attended the joint NPO Campo meeting, but Jen, I'll leave those comments to you. I met with the Water and Sewer Committee this past Thursday, and a whole lot of discussion about in-town versus out-of-town rates, and it's very clear that they struggle with that. And so whoever comes after me for the next meeting, be prepared for more detailed discussion on that. And also had a food council meeting last week, but there was nothing substantial talked about at that meeting. That's it.
Kathleen.
On the partnership, we are going to be revisiting the MOU because the MOU is out of date based on how the partnership has evolved. So that will be continued topic. we now are in the funding cycle for the major rapid rehousing, which is 800 and some odd thousand for the county. The largest number of applications seen so far outstrip what we have. So that's going to be a challenge on that portion. On the COG side, at the state level, the TREC, which is the Racial Equity Committee with the Department of Justice. It's the state under Anita Earls and Josh Stein met with the COGs. And thank you, Jen, because one was interesting. They were not familiar with GARE. So I've connected them with GARE, and hopefully that will help, further the coordination. And also on the COG side, you guys, if you haven't signed up for Regional Summit, please do. Sandbox Challenge is the construction circular economy. And what we're trying to take a look at is how do we remove the waste that's involved with construction and redevelopment. Major issue facing us. So those are the highlights. And I'll keep you posted.
Thank you, Kathleen. Matt.
Not a lot to report. We did have a tourism board meeting earlier this month. Actually, it was last week. There should be some appropriations coming our way in terms of budget amendments due to some special project funding or special partnership funding that we approved, ironically enough, for the parade. And then there was also another special project that we'll be doing, which is more interpretive signage. Stephanie came to us and we'll be doing some more interpretive signage for outside the Burwell School. So there'll actually be 3 interpretive signs, one about the history of the building, and then some more contemporary history of the building. And it actually reminded me that one of the Burwells, I believe it was Anna Burwell, actually is a founder of what is now Queen's University in Charlotte. I did not know that. Well, one of the Burwells. One of the Burwells.
The redheaded daughter died on a boat way back yonder before and that's what killed, maybe Miss Burrell leave. Give Miss Burrell credit where credit's due.
Yeah, one of the Burwells, and then also an interpretive sign on the people of color, including enslaved and free, who worked at the school. So that will be a pretty exciting project. Also, TJ Cog organized a pontoon boat tour of Jordan Lake to really get educated on the ecology of the lake and what they've been doing on improving the quality of the lake. I know we don't play a big role with Jordan Lake as much, but it is one of the places that we can get an allocation of some water in an extreme. If we're going there, it's a real extreme emergency. But so it was just good to know, what has been done and just the things that they have done over the last few years to clean up Jordan Lake. I mean, 900 tires pulled out of the lake. I'm like, how do you get 900 tires? But it was pretty eye-opening, and also discouraging knowing that some folks don't treat our natural resources as the precious items they are. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Matt. And I was over here trying to find my notes from the joint MPO meeting, which somehow I'm not able to quickly get my hands on. So I apologize. I will say, I know that I forwarded board members a link to the recording of the meeting. And if anyone has the chance to watch the first few minutes where there's, after a few minutes of technical difficulties, there were some really terrific public comments from folks in Durham, Orange, and Wake County, just really urging Campo and the DCHC MPO to really try to align expressed values with the projects that we're asking to be funded. So just lots of imploring for multimodal transportation and also making things safer for those other modes of transportation. So those are great comments. And then we had some discussion near the end of the meeting about those comments. And I think that it would be accurate to say that the MPO that we are a part of, the DCHC, is kind of interested to see where Campo goes with this, because certainly they have many more jurisdictions that they're contending with. So it's just there's a different dynamic at play than there is in ours. So I apologize, no other details of that meeting are springing to my mind in this moment, but that was the main highlight. Mark, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. And then Eli is working, she's going to be working on formatting the recommendations from the mayor's task force on reimagining public safety. And I have promised a letter of introduction that will be ready to go with those by the end of this week. So you all really will be seeing those soon. And I have definitely been the holdup there. So I apologize for not making things happen sooner in pulling those final pieces together. Those are all my updates. Any updates from the town manager? Any additional updates from staff other than the ones in the packet? Okay. If we're all done with updates, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Kathleen, seconded by Mark, and we can roll call to the very end.
Commissioner Bell,
Aye.
Commissioner English,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye, and a good night to all.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Commissioner Lloyd,
And that is unanimous. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and attention. Have a good night.